I think we can all agree that the one thing that has never disappointed in Jujutsu Kaisen would be its fights. And this fight between Reggie and Megumi is obviously no exception to this. I'd go as far as to say that this is one of the most well thought out fights in the series right now. And naturally, I'd have to give some praise to Gege Akutami. He always makes sure that his fights are full of substance and they leave you with something to think about. Nearly every scenario that has been written by the author right now has really just flexed the creativity and imagination of Gege, and it just shows that for cursed energy, there's always a different avenue that can be used in every single fight, and this is something that I have stressed time and time again, especially when it comes to Megumi's abilities. In the past, I've praised Megumi's abilities for being nothing short of resourceful. And this fight begins to prove this on multiple occasions. By using Max Elephant immediately on Reggie, who uses talismans in order to fight, he tries to use the water from the elephant so that Megumi can easily destroy Reggie's talismans and prevent him from having any type of way to fight Megumi back. And Megumi knows this. So with his attempt to exploit Reggie's weakness, he knows that Reggie is gonna immediately panic, and naturally, Megumi would take advantage of this situation as well, because he would originally have used his first attack as a distraction, while Reggie would counter him by using the very object that he needs at that single moment. And Megumi would use his Shikigami, which would also happen to be exactly what he needs at this moment. Really, it's not too crazy to draw a comparison between Reggie's talisman and Megumi's Shikigami. Not only are they both resourceful with their abilities, but they also use them similarly. Even Reggie draws a similar comparison between the things that he recreates through his talismans and Megumi's Shikigami by saying that the things he recreates act like Shikigami. With anything that Reggie recreates, he can make it do whatever he wants by giving it a command. And like he says, knives don't usually fly, and they don't. And through giving it a command, Reggie can allow things to do things that they shouldn't be able to do. And a specific thing that Reggie says that really stands out would be that a sorcerer is nothing but a con artist. And this saying is really true. There's something that you would notice throughout the entire fight. Megumi and Reggie are battling each other mentally, and they're both really just trying to trick each other so they can force an opening so that they could kill their opponent. They're really just trying to be one step ahead of one another. One of the little moments of this fight that really leaves an impression is the part where a knife is disguised as a carrot. Through doing this, Reggie was able to finally throw Megumi off. And this fighting style says a lot about Reggie's character, especially when we think about the previous chapters in which Reggie was tricking, manipulating, and also trying to use people. And the fact that Megumi would fight similarly to Reggie also says a lot about him. Even so, there's still a lot we don't know about Megumi, even coming so far into the story. It's a mystery, just like whatever this thing that shows up when Megumi uses his domain. If I had to take a wild guess, I'd say that this looks like the spine of the chimera, which would eventually show up once we get Megumi's domain at its highest level. And even with this domain not being at its highest level, it is still capable of completely decimating anyone who comes in contact with it. And it turns out that the domain itself was incomplete, yet Megumi makes up for this by placing a condition on himself in order to get 120% of his cursed technique's maximum potential. And because Megumi's domain was actually incomplete, he was able to catch Reggie off guard. You see, on most circumstances, when you use a domain, you would have a surefire attack. And in this situation, Reggie prepared for a surefire attack to be launched at him. But that attack that Reggie was looking for never came. With this moment of Reggie being in shock, came Megumi's opportunity. It's really funny because Megumi's disadvantage actually ended up giving him an advantage at this moment. And this was due to the simple domain not being able to negate your stereotypical curse technique, and with Megumi being able to draw out 120% of his curse technique, he would completely destroy Reggie, which allows Megumi to completely overwhelm his opponent by not only attacking him with clones of himself, but to also allow the Shikigami to fight at the same time. How do you fight that back? I mean, I wish I could tell you, but I don't think there's anything you can do. And this is due to the simple fact that when it comes to any action that you would make, Megumi would completely react to it and snuff it out completely. And with Megumi using 120% of his curse technique, we even have Reggie saying that it is even worse than a can't miss domain, meaning that it's a lot harder to deal with than a domain that has a guaranteed hit attack that is always going to damage you, no matter what. And of course, as we've seen before, Reggie was prepared for that exact situation. The reason why this would be worse than a guaranteed hit domain is because there is no way you would be able to prepare for a curse technique at its 120% potential, because not only is it going to be able to do things that we wouldn't already have known from your fight off the jump, but you would immediately have to adapt. And that's if you're not already dead by the time you figure out how to stop your opponent's cursed technique. And this makes Jujutsu Kaisen have some of the most interesting mind games in fights of recent memory. Here's when things get a little bit complicated. Megumi's domain being incomplete was a factor as to why he was able to defeat Reggie in a single moment. But this incomplete domain also makes it all the more likely for Megumi to lose, because once Reggie figures out what kind of condition Megumi has so that he can even use his domain in the first place, Reggie can use that against him, which is different from your ordinary fight of domains, because originally Reggie had the right idea by countering the domain with his own domain, but he was soon able to figure out that a condition was the reason why his first method did not work. And this makes the fight of the domains become a gamble. You see, in order to bring out the power within him, Megumi had to give himself a weakness so that he could be able to use the power that he did not originally have. Megumi had to give in order to gain, and so the condition he placed himself under was to bear the weight of whatever he kept in his shadow, only to have the weight of whatever Megumi stores within his shadow inevitably crush him. And this would be the price that he would pay in order to use 120% of his curse technique. Everything Megumi did up to this point was really just a gamble. And while Megumi is being crushed, he ultimately puts Reggie under the same circumstance by dropping the max elephant on him. After seeing this, I've begun to notice a pattern when it comes to all of Megumi's fights. He's always fighting to the death, with his life always being on the line against his opponents. And he has no problem doing it every single time. And with both Megumi and Reggie being crushed, it's kinda no different than how your standard domain expansion fight would begin. It really turns into an endurance test, and from this entire fight, this was the scenario that both of them were trying to avoid, due to outwitting each other the entire time. And the biggest highlight of this fight would be the moment when Reggie uses a 2-story wooden house to store into Megumi's shadow in order to crush him with the weight of the house. And here's a nice detail that I like about most fights in Jujutsu Kaisen. The environment does a lot for what's going on with every fight. Reggie would have won this situation, but the house crushed through the floor of the building and led Reggie and Megumi to fall inside of a pool. And with Reggie's talismans being wet, this would be Megumi's perfect opportunity to kill Reggie. But again, one of them was one step ahead of each other. Megumi had planned from the beginning for his divine dog to take advantage of a situation like this, and he tears into Reggie, with Reggie saying that everything comes down to a sorcerer's lies. And when you think about it, from the very moment Megumi met Reggie, everything was built upon Reggie's lie, and the lie that Remy told Megumi to get him into this fight. And even the fight itself was built upon one big lie, with both fighters just lying to each other throughout the entire fight until caving in on their opponent.